A year ago, the Black Panthers were much more active. You heard much more about that type of struggle. Is the time of the Black Panthers past?
The Black Panthers still exist, and the Black Panthers are still extremely active in the Oakland community and in communities all over the country. I'm not sure whether you are aware of what is now happening in the Black Panther Party and the kinds of things that members of that party are doing now.
No, but tell me.
First of all, if you're going to talk about a revolutionary situation, you have to have people who are physically able to wage revolution, who are physically able to organize and physically able to do all that is done.
Oh Michael!
Ashley!
My name is Ashley Judd.
Ashley Judd is here! Ashley Judd is here!
Ashley Judd is here!
Yeah, but the question is more, how do you get there? Do you get there by confrontation, violence?
Oh, is that the question you were asking?
Yeah.
See, that's another thing. When you talk about a revolution, most people think violence, without realizing that the real content of any kind of revolutionary thrust lies in the principles and the goals that you're striving for, not in the way you reach them. On the other hand, because of the way this society is organized, because of the violence that exists on the surface everywhere, you have to expect that there are going to be such explosions. You have to expect things like that as reactions. If you are a black person...
We will end this evening with a reading from the Book of Carl. If you look at Earth from space, you see a dot.
Live in the black community all your life and walk out on the street every day seeing white policemen surrounding you. When I was living in Los Angeles, for instance, long before the situation in LA ever occurred, I was constantly stopped. No, the police didn't know who I was, but I was a black woman, and I had a natural, and they, I suppose, thought that I might be a, quote, militant. And when you live under a situation like that constantly, and then you ask me, whether I approve of violence. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense at all.
Have you been to the gynecologist yet?
Knock on the shoulder. You adjust the microphone as you talk, man. For their gracious aid.
Whether I approve of guns. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. Some very, very good friends of mine were killed by bombs that were planted by racists.
Boo! Yes, boo!
I remember from the time I was very small, I remember the sounds of bombs exploding across the street, our house shaking. I remember my father having to have guns at his disposal at all times because of the fact that at any moment we might expect to be attacked. The man who was at that time in complete control of the city government, his name was Bull Connor, would often get on the radio and make statements like, niggers have moved into a white neighborhood, we better expect some bloodshed tonight. And sure enough, there would be bloodshed.
I am a nasty woman.
For their gracious...
After the 4 young girls who lived, one of them lived next door to me. I was very good friends with the sister of another one. My sister was very good friends with all 3 of them. My mother taught one of them in her class. My mother, in fact, when the bombing occurred, one of the mothers of one of the young girls called my mother and said, can you take me down to the church to pick up Carol? We heard about the bombing, and I don't have my car. And they went down, and what did they find? They found limbs and heads strewn all over the place.
But, yeah, I'm a nasty woman.
And then after that, in my neighborhood, all of the men organized themselves into an armed patrol. They had to take their guns and patrol our community every night because they did not want that to happen again. I mean, that's why when someone asks me about violence, I just find it incredible. What it means is that the person who's asking that question has absolutely no idea what black people have gone through, what black people have experienced in this country.
We'd love to have you work in the fields with us.
Work in the field?
That's part of that. That's
Senator, I'm a house nigga. No, it's a joke.
In this period, the pain to remain the same outweighed the pain to change. I see that the time period brought on an evolution, and it's contagious like hot coals. One ignites the next, and the next, and the next, and the next. When you get tired enough, it's when you begin to want to sacrifice everything inside of you. The fear just leaves. This is what happened in this time period.
Bobby Seale is going through all types of physical and mental torture. But that's all right, because we said even before this happened, and we're going to say it after this, and after I'm locked up, and after everybody's locked up, that you can jail revolutionaries, but you can't jail a revolution.
We hear it so much that it feels like a buzzword, but it is far from it. Climate change is a real and serious issue.
You might run a liberator like Eric Cleave out the country, but you can't run liberation out the country. You might murder a freedom fighter like Bobby Hutton, but you can't murder freedom fighting, and if you do, you come up with answers that don't answer, explanations that don't explain, you come up with conclusions that don't conclude, and you come up with people that you thought should be acting like pigs, that's acting like people and moving on pigs, and that's what we've got to do. So we're going to see about Bobby, regardless of what these people think we should do, because school is not important and work is not important. Nothing's more important than stopping fascism, because fascism will stop us all.
In a thunderous, resounding, united voice that we have no intentions of stopping this fight until we have eradicated every single remnant of racism in this country. Until we have ended the war in Vietnam and the neo-colonialism in Africa. We are not going to stop fighting until every political prisoner is free and until all the monstrous dungeons in this country are mere memories of a nightmare.
Boo! Yes, boo!
Aloha. So, to get straight to the point, the flat earth going mainstream is a nasty woman. That's what that is. It's a nasty woman who's trying to create a level of consciousness that is locked into an illusion. These are all micro chapters to macro chapters of consciousness that the mainstream itself could be seen as an artificial intelligence. Now, something had to create that artificial intelligence. And that artificial intelligence, at least at some point, will be limited to the consciousness of the being who created it. So when they create a level of consciousness that is based upon telling you your relationship to the non-physical reality, telling you your relationship to who and what you are when you leave this physical reality, and who and what you were before you got here. For observational purposes, they give you everything. Everything from their perspective, from their level of consciousness. Excuse me. Their level of consciousness has not only accepted the illusions of mainstream religions mainstream education systems, mainstream theories, mainstream entertainment, but it has celebrated it, prided itself with that, and has taken that alchemy and has amplified it amongst millions and millions of people for hundreds and hundreds of years. These mind control programs have existed. And if you think this is the good guy versus the bad guy, you're still in kindergarten. It's way more complex than that. And in relation to our level of engagement, it goes down to your basic resources. You wake up in the morning and you have some basic things that you need to expand your level of consciousness through this physical experience, including breathing, including water, food, shelter. When somebody, something, some entity, some group says, we own this. See, the indigenous cultures, this is why they never went into that whole, this is my shit. For the most part. They weren't like, nah, this is our land overall. I mean, there were locations, but that's a different thing. That's a different kind of relationship as opposed to this is your property. That's a different world. This democratic, so-called capitalistic society has made a business out of that property. And the only way they can do that is if they have separated the majority of the people who inhabit these lands from their original timelines. So this is the rewriting of history books. This is the manipulating your consciousness to think that you are a slave, that your ancestors weren't already around the earth plane before any of these Western-driven so-called settlers and movers and shakers started moving anywhere. There's an entire world that predates that. What's being told to us today is that the society as it exists today is the evolutionary peak of this experience. That's what allows this system, this self-destructive, cannibalistic society, what allows it to be as separated from nature and separated from any kind of balances, universal balances. The only way it can be that way is if they have at first convinced you that you are the best there is and ever was. As your level of consciousness through your experience expresses itself as. It creates artificial completion points. This is your university system. This is your political realm. This is your idea of forward progress through technology. This is what all these things are, these compartmentalized versions of evolutionary growth they call innovation. based upon the Big Bang, based upon the evolution theory, the gravity theory, the law of the relativity theory. All of these theories are the frameworks of a synthetic universe. So when you have no meaning and purpose, and you simultaneously have an artificial meaning and purpose through these new age universes that is channeled through a consciousness that is not completely tuned in to the benevolence that the potential of the human experience has to go through. In order to experience this reality, the extremes of the positive and the negative, both physical and non-physical, take many lifetimes to try to figure out how this get your groove, basically. Lifetimes upon lifetimes. This is what some people call reincarnation. You can just understand it as, you know, are you older than, you know, what you are right now? Your non-physical self. Are you older than who you are now in this physical experience? A lot of people who have tapped into their non-physical reality are going to say, yes, there's something more there. There's some energy, some intelligent energy that exists before my birth, and it will expand upon my death based upon every layer of this experience, waking state and when we're asleep, dream state, all these different versions, frequencies of who and what we are. They're all a part of the same music, to be as like general as possible, because the point is, I wanted to get into this, is that the artificial universe that gets sold to people is kind of like pop culture. You know how something's missing with pop culture. It doesn't at all feel real. There's no way you can tell anybody that pop culture is it's like a real tangible thing. It's an idea. Somebody made it up. So the same thing is happening with people's interpretations of the universe itself, down to the very physics of the universe itself, both on the physical, the psychological, and the spiritual, the soul, the mind, and the body. So all of these different songs and albums and lyrics that are part of different albums of different times, made up of different lyrics and different harmonics, based upon whatever it was going on outside of just of our individual interpretation of what's going on. So like your relationship with the collective experience is, if you can understand that there's somebody else that is different than you, at least one person. Well, there's a whole bunch of people. How many friends do you got? How many people are you aware of in this world? It's a big ass symphony. And these pirates basically showed up and was just like, these pirates of all kinds, because I haven't even been paying attention to the slides at this point. But these new age pirates who are sliding into your reality, another artificial universe. I mean, I've said it so many times, I don't know what else to say. This is It's so important to, before you start building a universe, you have to understand like where your foundations are. There's so many empty questions or unanswered questions and empty answers that are in and around this entire experience. And before the system that has been designed to keep us enslaved on all the soul, the mind, and the body layers of existence, all of those experiences have been locked down by a very complex system of illusions. And all of a sudden, you have another group of people who just got it. They got it. They understand. David Wilcock, this dude right here you're looking at, he's going to tell you he got it. He's going to say, this is it. And many people are going to believe him because they've believed everything in and around his little sphere of influence. Based upon what? Information from where? From who? Is it the the almighty truth when he talks about the Pleiadians and the sphere being a alliance and the cabal? When you look in his eyes, when you look at his face, when you hear his voice, is that what you hear? When he's talking about that new age universe. I just kind of want to put this whole thing to rest, this whole new age community stuff to rest, because how I've broken it down in the past, it's the most dangerous thing out there. The most dangerous thing out there is the system that is telling you this is what it is. They're telling you they got it. They're telling you it's all about this and don't pay attention to this. How is that any different than the mainstream system itself? If you're going to challenge one part of your reality, you're just creating another illusion for yourself. If you do not challenge every other part of your reality that has been conditioned into your experience since day one, to the soles of your feet on your birth certificate, to acknowledge in this slave system that the corporation of first name, middle name, last name is now open for business and will collect and pay into this maritime admiralty colonial enslavement system, to where everything in reference to the fiat currency, the so-called democracy, the politics, all of it is one big story. And the people who are selling you your so-called future, your so-called universe, before they start even asking questions about what has been given to them from this system, those are the people you need to start asking twice, what's going on here? There's so many questions that need to be asked in reference to this entire system that has kind of wrapped itself around the consciousness, like tentacles around like tentacles within inside of like a motor or something, like an engine, like a well oiled machine that constantly grows itself through the experiencers. So the relationship between the experience and the experiencers is what expands the consciousness. This is just another fancy way of explaining what happens when you wake up in the morning. So in your dream, you're still there. Like when you wake up and you remembered any kind of dream or it affects you in any kind of way, that's you. Whatever you is, does it look like you? Like when you look in the mirror here? No. There's many forms that you can take in dream space. That's still you though, so you is largely non-physical. Here, there's a definite here, we call here. But there's something more. And people are like, I think there's something more. Something more to that. It's not just this, whatever this is.
Camus said there is only really one serious philosophical question, which is whether or not to commit suicide. I think there are 4 or 5 serious philosophical questions. The first one is, who started it? The second is, are we going to make it? The third is, where are we going to put it? The fourth is, who's going to clean up? And the fifth, is it serious? But still, should you or not commit suicide? This is a good question. Why go on? And you only go on if the game is worth the candle. Now, the universe has been going on for an incredible long time. And so, really, a satisfactory theory of the universe has to be one that's worth betting on. That's it seems to me, absolutely elementary common sense. If you make a theory of the universe which isn't worth betting on, why bother? Just commit suicide. But if you want to go on playing the game, you've got to have an optimal theory for playing the game. Otherwise, there's no point in it. But the people who coined the fully automatic theory of the universe were playing a very funny game. What they wanted to say was this: all you people who believe in religion are old ladies and wishful thinkers. You've got a big daddy up there and you want a comfort and thing, but life is rough. Life is tough. And success goes to the most hard-headed people. That was a very convenient theory when the European-American world was colonizing the natives everywhere else. They said, we are the end product of evolution, and we're tough, see? I'm a big, strong guy because I face facts, and life is just a bunch of junk, and I'm going to impose my will on it and turn it into something else, you see? And I'm real hard. See, that's a way of flattering yourself. And so it has become academically plausible and fashionable that this is the way the world works. In academic circles, no other theory of the world than the fully automatic model is respectable. Because if you're an academic person, you've got to be an intellectually tough person. You've got to be prickly. See, there are basically 2 kinds of philosophy. One's called prickles, the other's called goo. And prickly people are precise, rigorous, logical. They like everything chopped up and clear. Goo people like it vague. For example, in physics, prickly people believe that the ultimate constituents of matter are particles. Goo people believe it's waves. And in philosophy, prickly people are logical positivists and goo people are idealists. And they're always arguing with each other. But what they don't realize is that neither one can take his position without the other person. Because you wouldn't know you advocated prickles unless there was somebody else advocating goo. You wouldn't know what a prickle was unless you knew what goo was. Because life is not either prickles or goo, it's gooey prickles and prickly goo. They go together like back and front, male and female. And that's the answer to philosophy. See, I'm a philosopher, and I'm not going to argue very much, because if you don't argue with me, I don't know what I think. So if we argue, I say thank you, because owing to the courtesy of your taking a different point of view, I understand what I mean, so I can't get rid of you. But however, you see, this whole idea that the universe is just nothing at all but unintelligent force playing around, not even enjoying it, is a put-down theory of the world. People who had an advantage to make, a game to play, by putting it down and making out that because they put the world down, they were a superior kind of people.
And a lot of the ways we perceive that universe of what this is from people who still buy into the university system, which hasn't completely imploded yet. People are still holding on to that level of consciousness, and have not only been holding on to that level of consciousness, but have built an entire universe based upon the cosmology of that level of consciousness, the heliocentric programming. This is what the entire New Age community is based upon. The flat earth questioning of your reality not only uproots the foundation of the mainstream interpretation of this universe, but it uproots the foundation of the entire New Age community.
Because I've got this branding out there from being on Ancient Aliens and having the 2 shows on Gaia that are weekly shows, etc., etc. Look, this flat earth thing is a fucking joke. Excuse my French. There is no flat earth. If you walk from one side of the earth to the other, or you sail in a sailboat, you're going to go back to where you started.
And it's not only going to be just uprooted, that energy is going to be co-opted, has already been co-opted by the mainstream system, and will be repackaged and sold to the masses, along with all these other realizations. I'm saying quite possibly a flat earth interpretation, more moving into a simulation theory / transhumanism, non-physical interpretation of this reality. So basically taking the atheistic system of the university and just confirming it in this universe, which they have already done with the Big Bang and so on and so forth within the scientism community, but confirming it in a more evolved, in their kind of way of explaining it, an evolved interpretation of what this reality is. So we already know NASA is going to implode, which will implode heliocentrism, which will implode the heliocentric perspective of this universe and all that other stuff in and around that. So the replacement is what I'm more focused on right now. See, when you focus just in the checker game of what's going on with flat versus globe, then you're not preparing yourself for what they have clearly set up. There's some kind of, they're very much aware, the so-called they are very much aware of many moves out in this whole experience. And if you don't think the New Age community, sponsored by Oprah, the network, the Oprah network, Deepak Chopra, co-opting people like Eckhart Tolle, Muji, why you see all of these, these other, what do they call them? Like swamis and gurus and so on and so forth. It's shifting from one level of consciousness that was painted with, for example, a negative symbol to an idea of change. This is what Obama was. Before the global colonial United States, for paint purposes, changes, first the United States had to change. So their idea of change was Barack Obama. Now Donald Trump is there to show you that, balance it all out again, make you know that things ain't really going to change. on this level because they need to change on a so-called collective level. So this is when they're going to install this whole new world order based upon a new world cosmology or interpretation of this reality, which has already been placed out there by people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye, Michio Kaku, Ray Kurzweil, and all these other people who are praising CERN and quantum physics and the quantum whatever and the ancient aliens and so on and so forth. And you can look at this right now. I said this about 2 videos ago. You can look at collective evolution in the bottom right hand corner is the news website that is playing David Wilcock's stuff. And I was mentioning there's a controlled opposition out there that is telling you this is what you need to see, this is how you need to experience your reality. And it's got its tentacles in all kinds of different communities, the Black conscious community, the New Age community, the Flat Earth community, the conspiracy theory community, alternative, aggressive, progressive communities. All of these is whatever people affiliate themselves with. This stuff has systems, just like if you can understand that COINTELPRO was putting its tentacles into the Black Panther Party to tear it down from the inside out, you can understand that they didn't kill that program. They expanded that program because they know the people are not going to forget. We will not forget what led up to today. Our oral tradition of storytelling has succeeded. People are very much aware of much of the information that shakes the very foundation of this entire mainstream reality. And once people start asking the right questions, that's when things will actually start changing. This is the thing. If you start asking the right questions, what you're doing is basically, in that same moment, you're sharing an entirely different interpretation of somebody's reality, of their universe, just by asking a question from a different perspective, or being open to a discussion that is not as mainstream as usual. Like, these are like the micro versions of expanding consciousness that we don't really pay attention to because it's just kind of like breathing. Like, is it you that's breathing? Like, are you making your heart beat, or is it beating? Or are you just breathing? Like, what is it? So, how I'm seeing it in, and how I want to share it within this video, is a lot of the ways that you're going to be able to see what is coming to be is to pay attention to what the controlled opposition is telling you to look forward to, or to believe in, or to follow. When they're telling you something, as opposed to just asking you, like, are you constantly expanding your awareness? There's a difference there between telling somebody, you see, like telling somebody something like David Wilcock, he tells you what's going down with the Sphere Being Alliance and all this Cobra stuff and whatever comes through the New Age community and that whole alien agenda. He tells you what's going on. But when it comes to asking questions, there's a wall there. And that's the entire intent of the entire New Age community. It's just to say, well, excuse me, as soon as we hit these walls, all you got to do is institute these prescription drugs. One of them says, oh, well, those are just those people. They're just experiencing their karmic debt. So whatever's happening to them, they deserve it. Which is just another nihilistic way of interpreting what's going on with the whole colonial mindset. Not just limited to the colonial practice, but just, like I said earlier, saying this is my property, this is my, everything. Because it confirms like who you think you are. So it kills something with your inherently with your relationship to nature. Knowing that when you are not here anymore, you're going to dust back to dust. So what are we really talking about here? Mainstream religions tell you exactly what they say. Oh yeah, this is it. That's it. This is all you need to focus on. This is exactly how it is. That's what Christianity says. When they come knocking on that door, Jehovah's Witness, anybody, when they come knocking on your door, that's exactly what it is. Them Jehovah's Witness, they're going to give you that little magazine. That's exactly what it is. From their world, from their eyes, from their perspective. Same thing is going from the mainstream scientism community, an entire system. When you look at the system, the thought process of the system, you can see a person. This is what gets me so much with the whole like people in the flat earth hoping that the flat earth is going to go mainstream and all this whatever's going to change such and such. It's always going to boil down to the people, the consciousness of the people. If you give them some information that helps them realize they've been lied to for centuries, you better hope and fucking pray that they are compassionate enough and aware enough to realize that, there's something more than that little punk ass magic that this system has used. This cheap ass magic tricks this system has used against the people. And their cheap ass new age magic tricks that they're tuning into. There's two things that are going on here. There's an expansion of consciousness and there's an implosion of a dead consciousness, a parasitic consciousness. There's space being created there in your mind, your body, and your soul. And if you don't feel it with your own questions and your own intelligent electronics, your own thoughts, your own interpretations of this reality, then someone or something else will do that for you. This is what this new age world is. This is what all this basic, just look at this for a moment right now. Basic math. The channeler information that comes through these new age channelers, it maxes out at your lowest capacity. Your lowest capacity for consciousness is the channeler's highest. It maxes out at your lowest factor. Proof is the individual here has to let something go. in order to process that information.
Flat Earth theory, is there any truth to that?
Are you asking if your Earth is flat?
Yeah, because I've been hearing people say that.
You know it's not, yes?
Confirm it for myself, so.
Well, all right. You can most likely go along with the understanding that objects floating in space will more often than not form spherical bodies when left to their own devices. Yes?
Yes.
You've seen this demonstrated when you see pictures coming back from your astronauts playing around with liquids in space?
But zeroing in on this video, it looks like that these channels have to protect their existence pretty much.
And you see them forming spheres?
Yes.
There you go.
There it is.
Does that help you?
It does. Thank you.
Now,
Sure.
this does not mean that there cannot be dimensions of reality where the physics is different, so that what they live on, though it may not be called a planet specifically, can actually be a flat surface. But that's not the physics of your dimension. But it is a reality on other dimensional levels.
It maxes out at the antenna. It's like a frequency. It's almost like a wireless router and motor or modem. You know how they have the different networks and speeds and so on and so forth. Well, the body, the physical body as an antenna, when it's channeling that shit, it just maxes out at a particular frequency. The entire New Age community is based upon that max out point. And since it has realized that it has maxed out, it has then created an entirely synthetic universe in hopes that people will add more density to that artificial universe. But the thing is, people are tearing it apart because it's it's largely anchored in the already inherently dead mainstream universe. So what we're seeing right now with all of these collective evolution websites and everything coming together with the New Age, Oprah, Eckhart Tolle, Deepak Chopra, the alien agenda, ancient aliens, all of this Sasquatch stuff on mainstream cable, Joe Rogan talking about Sasquatch, a lot of people talking about interdimensional realms, ayahuasca, mushrooms, psilocybin, just like mind expanding non-physical interpretations of this reality has been part of our everyday experience for the most part, just based upon like news, as opposed to back in the day where basically they didn't even really talk about any of that stuff. It was just kind of like fringe. Now it's become part of the reality, and in that shift, the old pillars are now being checked out, and they're trying to figure out whether or not they were designed to hold up the natural expansion, or they were designed to set the foundation to the synthetic universe. That's basically what it's boiling down to. Like, are your pillars, which is you, who you are, everything that you interpret in this reality, it's a pillar. Is it based upon something somebody else told you, or is it based upon you discerning from the inside out what that information is in and around everything that individual told you? The mainstream is an individual perspective on the whole. You have a very like that Sophia artificial intelligence. It's like a person. Like when you hear, like you can only say certain jokes. It has a very particular cosmology. Hollywood has a very definite, like you can understand the different styles of drama, comedy, action, horror. And then in those genres, there's a particular style of movie production. There's a particular direction, like people who know like Wes Anderson, or people who have very noticeable production styles. Well, that's how like frequency and vibrations exist. The differences between like animal consciousness and the human consciousness, or whatever, any kind of higher consciousness that you can interpret. If something exists, whatever that is, it's compartmentalized in a way. So the mainstream system basically just took that basic interpretation of reality and then made more compartmentalizations that were largely based upon illusion, so that the system can profit from that illusion, if the people were to accept that as their reality. So in order to protect that world, this system has created illusions for people to fall into that can take an entire lifetime to dig themselves out of. And even when they get out there, they're still going to be engaging in a world that itself has much to get through and dig itself out of. From whose illusions? Why? How did this affect people of every race, of everywhere? Like, it's really it is really sad when people kind of just like want to brush this stuff away, not realizing that you have homework to do. This is the thing. A lot of the reasons why I share a lot of this information, because a lot of these perspectives come from doing a lot of homework. Many different styles of homework. And having shared a lot of this information with family members, friends, and even people online, it helps me see like the work that I still have to do. Like, we're constantly growing. There's always something more. You're always like expanding yourself. There's always something to learn. There's always something to challenge in your reality, like a dream. You're going to go from experiencing based upon the basic observations, the emotional body, in a dream realm, to challenging yourself in a dream realm. Like, how can you hold on to this lucid part of the dream? Do you know what's going on? Can you change the world as you are here? Are you aware enough? Are you like stable enough in this dream to both hold on to your idea of yourself and shift the dream that is around you, that's still being projected by you, who's asleep, and then beyond that, who's not limited to the physical body, and back around again. So that exists, and then you have all of these artificial parts of this universe that have been installed into people's consciousness that have a very definite intent and effect that is very lasting, that will very definitely need to have some kind of healing attention on many levels. It's each different shift you're looking at right here could be A dream within a dream. It's basically what happened. And still happening today. It's just, they're just calling it simulation theory, transhumanism, the alien agenda, the new age agenda, and so on and so forth. It's separation. That's what this is. Hate yourself, self-hatred, separate yourself. They sell you one thing and it's stressing something else. There's an intent into why you have to be filled with fear every single day. You have to be filled with all these. Look at your local news. Look at your mainstream media. Just imagine if that were a meal. It's like the worst McDonald's meal ever. It's like that old ass fish fillet sandwich that had been there since 11:30 in the morning. They just kept missing it. And then it showed up in your drive-through bag of trash. And it's not even fish anymore. It's like some plastic square with some like dried up tartar sauce and them old ass fries. There's a profit in that body maintaining some kind of sickness and some kind of disease. If you have healthy people, you're going to have a healthy society, and you can't have extremely rich people and have at the expense of people living completely impoverished. That's what this system in this society has chosen to do. So as long as people are locked into their emotional body and their lower energy centers of interpreting this experience, the people who are aware of the higher frequencies will have pretty much like eminent domain over them. Based upon the laws of frequencies, a higher frequency, all of the lower frequencies have to adjust in the presence of a higher frequency. The lower frequencies around have to adjust to that higher frequency. It's kind of like in the moment. So in the moment, the awareness of the moment is a spark. And that spark is a spark to the depths of who and what you are. The depths of how far you can go into who and what you are. In the space, in the math of that spark, which is that moment. So, I know some people know what I just said right there. I know it. It's hard to like replay that, but yeah. So the spark itself is one thing. It's like a muscle, and then the depths or the experience is another thing, or a muscle. Hence the conscious and the subconscious, the dream space and your waking space. There's an intent, there's an effect, there's a meaning, there's a purpose there. We've been taught not to ask any questions about that because they've already told us that we shouldn't ask any questions about that because they already know all the answers, which we are starting to realize are a complete and utter lie on many different levels, on many different frequencies. When that is the case, your entire universe has been uprooted. And you have to start asking a lot more questions about what's going on. Many of those questions people have tried to avoid for many generations, many lifetimes. It's not going to be that way anymore because people are going to have to start asking the right questions and getting these answers for the right questions rather than just filling their worlds with busy work. So the next idea of this experience is going to be sold to us with an artificial busy work universe. So like I said earlier, paying attention to the controlled opposition, what math, what science, what beliefs they're telling people, I started, just kind of cataloging the extremes of what they have shared within their belief systems. So like with people like Michael Moore, okay, so like Michael Moore and someone like Al Gore, they're just like all about like climate change and Donald Trump, stupid shit like that. And then you have people who are like TYT are concerned with like Bush on a very not Bush, but Hillary Clinton on a very shallow layer. And then you have other people like Alex Jones who's concerned with Hillary Clinton on possibly going into the Pizzagate stuff, but on you can see how that's a deeper layer. And then you have the conspiracy theorists in and around that world. You have these various layers of belief systems, and largely we can catalog a lot of these satellites, individuals, these satellites, based upon their deepest kind of like line they have thrown out into that ocean. So one of the deepest lines that I've heard Alex Jones throw out to that ocean is and these slides are just, I didn't put them in any order, I just started talking and knew that these slides were going to be a part of it, so it's probably not at all relating, but oh well, it's information, it works. Did I lose my train of thought? No, Alex Jones, his furthest line that I've heard him cast out into that ocean has been when he was on the Joe Rogan show and he was talking about, okay, I'm going to go as far as I can go. And he started talking about those like interdimensional pedophiles or something like that. Whatever he was saying, it was just like some kind of interdimensional, basically some kind of reptilian thing. So these malevolent interdimensional beings who do horrible shit, and then they infect like a parasite some of the people or the antennas that are in this physical reality. And that's basically like what I got out of that interpretation of what he was talking about. So you have him saying that, which is very much like what David Icke, the other controlled opposition, is talking about in reference to the bad guys. Instead of interdimensional pedophiles, he's calling them interdimensional reptilians. And everything is non-physical, so on and so forth, blah, 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 same thing. Then you have the New Age community who has the same kind of interpretation, which they just call it the Cabal or the Illuminati, and then goes into the Satanic and the Luciferian and all that other stuff. And then you have beyond that, within that, you have the secret space program, and then you have all the other documentaries of people who are them insiders in the FBI or the CIA and Area 51, and they would they talked about this and then they were taken out or they died mysteriously or whatever it was, like all kinds of things that are in and around the whole alien agenda, which confirms that entire universe for a lot of people. So those threads are deep in the real world in many ways, the so-called real world for many people, the status quo real world, which is like the mainstream or the pop universe. So when we start tracing back this pop universe blueprint, then we can see like how many of these storylines have been existing long enough to just set up another limitation for the future. So with this like cryptocurrency that's going on with like Bitcoin, many people are talking about, you know, the potentials of Bitcoin and shifting from the dollar to Bitcoin and so on and so forth. And I'm just like constantly asking questions about, are we going to focus on, that's just like the system focusing only on the what of flat earth and not really going into the how and the why of the heliocentric lie, the control grid, the power grid. So shifting over from the dollar to Bitcoin is just going to create another distraction, basically. From, it's going to create this micro change, just like shifting from one president to the next shifts every 4 years. You think there's something changing? It's not changing. It's evolving itself. Is it for your benefit? Of course not. But when they implode one system, you better believe they have created a profit-making system that exists after, that can profit off of that implosion, rebuilding itself. This is why when they invade particular countries, they get their money from contracts, from contractors going in there in the aftermath, so-called rebuilding it, then building all these military bases everywhere. This is the expansion of colonialism. And the currency, this cryptocurrency, the fiat currency system, this entire materialistic based currency system, the currency, the sea, the ocean, the maritime admiralty system that I mentioned earlier, this currency is not tapped into the resources of this earth. It's tapped into a materialistic interpretation of this entire universe. And until we uproot the entire the foundation, the pillars of that interpretation of this reality, anything that's going to be sitting on top of that sandcastle is just going to crumble, whether it's today, 20 years, or 50 years from today. So we sit and we wait. And our hopes and our prayers are based upon something or someone else, because we don't know what questions to ask. We keep asking the wrong questions because we've been conditioned to believe ourselves into a universe that has nothing to do with any of our organic expressions within this reality. So this is where the system is starting to eat itself. This is where people are starting to ask questions about eating certain things in this reality. Meats and fats and all that really boils down to a balance, psychological, spiritual, and physical. It affects us in every way. So when the pop culture is celebrating something, has made a business out of something, whatever that is, you have to believe that it's affecting you on not only the physical, but the psychological and the spiritual. Look at fast food companies as a whole. Look at the genetically modified, look at Monsanto as a whole. What is that circled around? A lot of people call themselves conscious and all this other stuff, whatever the hell that means. And a lot of the basic questions haven't even been discussed. These are your controlled opposition. These are their morals. That's what they give a shit about. Their material world. They put those activists out there next to Bernie Sanders, Susan Sarandon. They put these people out there and they say, you know, go out there and chirp this shit. Chirp, chirp, chirp. your actors, your athletes, your entertainers, you chirp, chirp, chirp. If you say one fucking word outside of that chirp, your entire career will cease to exist. Potentially, you will cease to exist. How many people you think are going to say anything other than a chirp? The majority will just stop speaking, which is exactly what this entire system is about. Because they got all the time in the world, as long as people keep paying into their universe. So they sell you the Hegelian dialectic on every level, on every frequency. Blue versus red, black versus white, up versus down, bad versus good, good guy versus bad guy, villain versus superhero, so on and so forth. The new version is just, instead of bad politicians, you have reptilian politicians. You'll have interdimensional politicians. And then what? Once you start asking those questions, you start getting answers you can't unknow. You start asking questions you can't unask. So all of these interdimensional versions of your reality are being sold to you to expand the synthetic interpretation. Make it more powerful, make it more real for you. So they got David Icke talking about it. They got Alex Jones even talking about it. Joe Rogan's talking about that. He won't talk about flat earth, but he'll talk about Sasquatch. He'll talk about, interdimensional stuff. He'll talk about psychedelics and that whole non-physical reality, that realm. What I'm saying is that I'm just laying out, as I close this video out, the controlled opposition mainstream. What is the mainstream thread of the controlled opposition? It's linking heavily into this simulation theory, transhumanism core that is locked into the New Age community. It's locked into, it can be easily locked into the flat earth community, especially this mainstream flat earth community shit. And then it's already easily in, it's already the fabric of the simulation theory and the transhumanism and CERN. And it comes along with fear too. With this is what the CERN part of it was. So you have, let's see, before I close this out, I don't want to forget anything. Alex Jones. Okay, so also I noticed in the Justice League, they're sharing this information about Atlantis and all these different types of humans. You'll notice the racial programming that's already in there. I don't even have to say it. You can just guess what's going on there, especially when you understand the Amazonian women. Okay, where is the Amazon? What are those women gonna look like? They're gonna look like Gal Gadot? Oh, okay. They're gonna look like the Princess Bride. Okay. Whatever you say. So anyway, main point is they have this whole Atlantis connection. They have this whole, the obvious racial programming is in the whole superhero thing. But they also have the cube references, the whole Saturn matrix. They're supposedly leaking this information out. It's not a mistake. It's both conscious and subconscious. As much as it's subconscious for these children who don't know what to do with this information, it's equally planted to affect the conscious adults, so-called conscious adults, looking at this, having some kind of interpretation of what the Saturn matrix is, and so on and so forth. It's making it more real when it starts to leak into something as potent as the mainstream storyline. But it also has a thread, it's a trend. And when you measure that up next to all of the other controlled oppositions, as many as you can get out there, you can see a definite storyline. So you have CERN, you have the whole ritualistic shit with CERN and dancing around and the demons and the monsters and the doorways and the stargates and whatever else that comes from the science fiction books and so on and so forth. You have it there. It's real for you because people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye have talked about it. Oh, great. Thanks, guys. You're smart. We're dumb. Tell us what else is about our universe. Tell us, please. Tell the nothingness, tell the little nothing people what the universe is. And if anybody thinks differently, you tell them to shut their mouths. You shut your mouth, little nothing. It's all about me dropping a mic, bitch. CERN, aliens. How about I just read it and just close it out? The mainstream media, let me see if I can get some good light in here. The mainstream media will skip right over the why and how and normalize something like flat earth. Same thing with like the New Age community. They'll focus so much on the what, the bad guys of heliocentrism. They'll focus so much on that you'll never be allowed to start asking how this has affected people, how the system has worked, and then go into why the system was created to affect people that way, why it exists on all of the soul, the mind, and the body levels. How and why. They'll focus so much on what you won't even get to that. They would have been already made a whole utopian community before you can even ask how and why. That's the intent of this program, to protect the creature comforts that come along with Western society that has been built on the blood and the bones of the indigenous people across the earth plane. Now today everybody is suffering. Everybody's got some shit going on. Back in the day, there was some people that was having castles and owning all kinds of shit, gold-plated pools and marble, everything. That's how out of control it got. But people are starting to ask the right questions now. So what was the rest? So the flat earth, I'll say, so yeah, the realm perspective of flat earth will be sold basically like from a McDonald's perspective. They won't go into the depths of what many of the indigenous people were already talking about, have already kind of like, basically it'll max out at a genetically modified hot dog, whatever that comes out of that reality. It'll be at best, it'll be a hot dog at a baseball game. And you'll be like, wow, I ain't been doing a baseball game in a long time. This is amazing. Hey, look, I got some food here. Good thing, because this is going to be a long game. Let's enjoy you're not even ever going to ask how or why. Be so happy with whatever they sell. So what else was there? Simulation theory. Okay, that I already referenced that in reference to the flat earth and the whole realm. Tesla stuff, technology that's already in the New Age community. They're already coming with that pretty hardcore. Justice League, Alex Jones, Interdimensional, got that. Atlantis, Amazonia, Q programming, Saturn, Joe Rogan, Bigfoot. What are the controlled ops selling to the people? That's the whole point. CERN, monsters, New Age, aliens, interdimensional travel, technology, light years. Okay, so light years and light speed, that whole thing will be now upgraded to a quantum perspective and then sold back to the people from this whole like simulation perspective. They'll basically just adjust the math just like they did with all these theories, change the definitions to benefit a McDonald's interpretation of this entire experience. So they'll just adjust everything from their level of consciousness, but won't ever take into account the very nature of the pedestal that they're standing upon, that microphone is, it's ridiculous. Like, nobody even asks these questions anymore. We've forgotten which questions to ask. So that's why I played that video in the front, was showing the difference between the different questions that were being asked back in the day. Angela Davis, Bobby Hutton, Bobby Seale, Fred Hampton, Leonard Peltier, Momia. I mean, they were asking some deep-ass questions about the very foundations of this experience. And now you have prepackaged microwave revolutionaries, in quotation marks, like Ashley Judd, Michael Moore, Bernie Sanders. These are your fucking revolutionaries. Cenk Uygur, Alex Jones, Russell Brand. These are your revolutionaries. When you've already listened to what Malcolm was saying, what Fred Hampton was saying, what the entire Black Panther community was saying, what Dr. Francis Cress Welsing was saying, with anybody who was talking about the information that challenges the very foundations of this entire so-called civilization. When you look at and hear somebody like Ashley Judd and Michael Moore talk about Trump as if it fucking matters, you know exactly what's going on there. They still believe in that scientific cosmology, that whole scientism religion. It's all one big gang. So they're going to utilize that math, that science, to their benefit. They're just going to so-called evolve it. And that's what I was saying was the biggest problem with the whole flat earth, looking and, pretty much dropping to its knees for the mainstream to just like give them a little something. Please, mainstream world, acknowledge our existence. Acknowledge that what we're saying is real. Please. Mainstream, HBO, CNN. Pretty please, with a cherry on top. We'll only talk about flat earth, I promise. We won't talk about anything else, I promise. It'll only be about flat earth, okay? I'll be the guy who does that. We'll only talk about flat earth, I promise. Flat earth, oh, nope. Heliocentrism has nothing to do with anything else. Not the beginnings of NASA, not the university system, nothing to do with colonialism, nothing. No siree. No, like Petrie. No. It's only flat earth around here. I don't get involved in that whole other stuff talking about humanity. I leave that up to the other people to talk about that. I'm the guy who only talks about flat earth just the way you want it. In a package. Here you go. Guess who they're going to call to get that? Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. So on that note, I just wanted to share that whole rundown of observing the perspectives, the extremes of your controlled opposition, the similarities, the trends, and kind of just like lay it all out there in what potentially might be. Based upon just like my interpretation. So that's pretty much it. Thank you for joining me. And until next time, from all my relations, peace, love, and harmony.